Ciao! In this video, I'm going to show you how to remove distractions in Lightroom using the new tools Generative AI and Object Aware. I'm also going to briefly discuss their biggest limitations, and I'm also going to explain why retouching in Lightroom is way better than retouching in Photoshop. Let's start. So the most exciting news is the new Generative AI feature for retouching. It is similar to Generative Fill in Photoshop. Its main function is to remove objects, not to create new ones. So this led Adobe to rename the healing tool to the remove tool. So let's see how this works. We need to go to the develop module. If you don't know where the button is located, it's here on the top bar, or you can use the shortcut D on your keyboard. And then once you are in the develop module, select remove. And then you want to select Generative AI. You can already see from here that they renamed the healing tool to remove tool, and then we still have heal and clone. So let's click Generative AI. And then from here, you want to brush over the object you want to remove, adjust. You can adjust from here the brush size and also the opacity to select with precision. So let's see, I'm okay with this size, and let's do this. So I have brushed over the object I want to remove, and then once you have brushed, you can use the refine tools to make the following selections. So for example, if you click on add, you can add a brush to refine the selection if I want to add more parts of the image, or I can use subtract to remove unwanted areas from the selection. For example, here I have included parts of her dress, so I really don't want that in the selection. And then you can click apply. You can still adjust the brush size in the mask refinement here, and then you can click apply. Lightroom Classic is using Adobe Firefly to generate 3 different variations. Is it working? Oh yeah, it's working. It's creating 3 different variations options for you. You can also select refresh if you're not happy with those variations that created. So for example, we can see this is the first variation, second one, and third one. All of these look great. Actually, I really like the third one, so I would just click close, and I'm happy with that. You can also select as necessary tool overlay, which is here. I keep it as always. So this feature lets you see and controls the display of pins on your image when you hover over it, which is very helpful if you ask me. And then there is visualize spots, which is a tool that shows you high contrast overlay to help you spot and select areas more accurately. For example, you see that we have objects here in the background which are not as in focus as our couple, and this lets us see where those objects are, for example. Something I briefly want to mention about this Generative AI tool is that it uses a web application, Adobe Firefly. So it offers new ways to create and significantly improves creative workflows using generative artificial intelligence. But the thing to note is that to use generative AI, you need an internet connection as it is a web application. So let's now talk about how to use Object Aware Remove in Lightroom. So Object Aware lets you detect an object within the brushed area to help you preserve as many details as possible from the scene. So for example, I'm going to brush over these 2 objects, and you're going to see that it has helped us detect those 2 objects. It is important to preserve as many details as possible from the scene because areas retouched with generative AI have lower resolution than the surrounding areas, meaning that they are not as sharp. So the brush stroke size and the removed area size determine how much softer these patches are. Now you want to ask yourself, are you retouching this image for social sharing, for printing? Is this in the background? Is this a more in focus area of the image? And you want to be careful with that. I'm going to also show you a tip that I have. So for example, in here, I'm going to click apply, and let's see what it does. And then I'm going to show you how I would help with keeping more details in this area. Okay, so for example, let's click close. As mentioned before, you can select variations. I I actually like the second one more, so I'm going to keep this one. And then as before, you can adjust in the refine controls here, tool overlay, visualize spots, etc. So let's close this and let's pretend that, let's work with this one, for example. Let's pretend that there was an area here which is more in the foreground that I wanted to try and preserve more details. I would use the heal tool and I would brush on that area and try to sample an area that has more details. Now, this is not a good job, but I'm hoping that you can get a sense of what I'm trying to say. So you can then use the heal tool on top of that to try and get more details once you have used the generative AI tool. So to use object aware, the process is the exact same as before. You only want to check object aware, and that helps you with detecting those objects that you want to remove. You can use generative AI in combination with object aware to analyze and automatically select the object and then remove it with Adobe Firefly for optimal result. Like for example, let's try another one. One thing that I would like to mention is that it's a bit slower than the other tools. So for easy objects to remove, I would actually use the heal tool, or I would not use the generative AI because that makes the process faster. For example, let's undo that and try just object aware but not generative AI and see how that works. You can always click refresh if you're not happy with the first option. I'm actually quite pleased with the removal of that object. Of course, there is more removal to be done in the background here. But for example, for a simple task like removing this branch tree in the foreground, which I don't like, I would use the heal tool because that is just fast. Sorry, that was not a good. I would use the heal tool, of course. I have made the size of the brush smaller so that I'm sampling less areas, and then I am just brushing and changing that. I'm going to select an area that has let's try this. So as you can see, this is not only faster, but also helps you keep more details into that area, which is very important here because this is the foreground and it's very in focus. Okay, now I'm going to finish editing this image with these new amazing tools while I talk about the main limitations of these tools and the biggest benefit and why this is better than retouching in Photoshop. So the first limitation that I want to talk about is the fact that you need an internet connection if you want to use generative AI. The second one is that it is a bit slower, as mentioned before, when compared to other tools, older tools, like for example the heal and clone tools. One significant limitation is that the areas retouched have lower resolution, as mentioned before. So for online viewing or small prints, this lower resolution might not be noticeable, especially in areas without much texture or details, like for example the areas here in the background, or for example sky or water. But for large prints, the lower resolution might become noticeable, especially if it affects a large portion of the photo or a visual focal point, like for example the parts here in the foreground. And I'm going to quickly remove this car and this sign in the background here and see how this works. The biggest benefit is that I'm actually really pleased with that. The biggest benefit is that Lightroom's retouching is completely flexible and non-destructive. So if you retouch in Lightroom, you won't have to redo it. Even if you go back to the original raw file and make a change, the retouching will adapt to those scenes. With the new generative AI mode in Lightroom, there's hardly any reason to retouch in Photoshop anymore. Also, I think this is way faster, the workflow to retouch these portraits. Let me also get rid of that. And let's try this one as we are testing this tool. I also think that for wedding photographers, portrait photographers working with large catalogs, let's try to refresh and see if it does a better work. With large catalogs, because you don't have to export all of the images, for example, all of these formal portraits, quit Lightroom and then import those images in Photoshop and retouch all of those formal portraits 4 minutes, hours, I don't know how long it takes you, but I think the workflow is more efficient and faster in Lightroom with these new tools. Now, I'm really happy and pleased with this tool. Let's quickly compare before and after. Let's also remove this object. You see that I'm trying to adjust the brush size, and I'm trying to use that always as small as possible, just because I'm trying to retain as much details as possible. Now you would also want to remove that, probably, as this is a very important portrait of this couple. Let's try and see how this works. Whoops. I'm okay with that. Let's see. I'm really detail oriented, so one thing I didn't mention, so this is the before and this is the after. See all of these objects in the foreground and background that we were able to remove with just few brush strokes that before would have required a lot of brush strokes, a lot of time, a lot of energy, and now we're able to do that with just few clicks with these new tools. But what I wanted to mention is that you need to update your Lightroom if you want to use these new tools. That's it for today. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave those down below. You will also find in the description box below links to my free editing guide and editing course. Don't forget to check the next videos that are about to appear on the screen. Thank you so much. Grazie, and I'll see you soon. Ciao!